video number 2. Okay, this video we're going to talk about some of the big wars that went on in Greek history. We're going to get all the way through Alexander the Great. All right, so the first war I want to talk about today is the Persian Wars, the famous Persian Wars fought between the huge, giant, powerful Persian Empire and the small, you could even say redneck, kind of backwater, small town Greeks. All right, this is a war that is really very much it's still important today. Right, it has implications in our culture and our values today. So first, I want to tell you just a little bit about the Persian Empire. All right, the Persian Empire was founded around 600 BCE, really closer to 500 BC, by a guy named Cyrus the Great. All right, he founded this early Persian Empire called the Achaemenid Empire. He expanded it, and it became the largest empire in the entire world at this time. All right, as you can see on this map, it stretched all the way from close to Greece. Eventually, they conquered the Egyptians, and it stretched all the way over to India, to the Indus River Valley civilization. So this was a huge, huge empire filled with millions of people of all different cultures, different languages, right, different values, all right, all living under one Persian king. Right. So when we talk about the Greeks versus the Persians, it's very much a David and Goliath kind of story, right? Where the Persians are the big giant empire, and you really wonder how could they possibly have lost a war to the Greeks? Okay, a little bit more about the Persians. All right, they weren't really. We think of them as the bad guys, but they weren't really the bad guys. They were led by kings. This was a very stable empire, very, very advanced. All right, this is an empire. Their king ruled a huge empire. He divided into smaller units called satrapies. All right, each one was ruled by a local governor called a satrap or a satrap. All right, so when the Persians would take over, when they would conquer people, they would say, you can keep your local rulers. You just need to report to the Persian king. You need to recognize him as king. All right, you can keep all your local customs. We don't want to get involved in the way that you live your lives. Another thing about the Persians, they followed a religion that's not really, there's only maybe a few thousand people who follow this religion today, but it's called Zoroastrianism. Okay, this was a religion. It was one of the earliest monotheistic religions, meaning they believed in one God. All right, there was a guy named Zoroaster who founded this religion. They worshipped a god called Ahura Mazda, just like Mazda, like the car. So Ahura Mazda was the great god, and they believed that he was the creator of all things and responsible for all things good, while he was constantly battling these evil spirits. All right, so they believed in this battle between good and evil, and they believed in heaven and hell, very similar to modern day Christianity in some ways. So this was the Persian religion, and you can see the symbol with the wing, like the eagle looking thing with the guy standing on top of it. That's the symbol for Zoroastrianism. All right, the Persians followed Zoroastrianism. Zoroastrianism didn't allow slavery. So the Persians didn't even have slavery. All right, they had nice roads, advanced mathematics and astronomy and science. They also even built underground irrigation systems for their farming. So this was a very advanced but big and powerful empire. All right, so let's go to the wars now. You don't need to write any of this down, but I do encourage you to read through it as I'm going along. So first, the Persians had conquered some little Greek cities kind of in the eastern part of Greece. All right, these were called Ionian cities. And these Ionian Greeks revolted against the Persians. So the Persians, they had part of their own empire revolting. They sent armies in to stop the rebellions. It took them 5 years, and part of the reason was because two Greek city-states, Etruria and Athens, they sent people to help the Ionian Greeks fight against the Persians. All right, so the Persians would never have really worried about Athens and Sparta and these other cities had they felt like they got involved in business that wasn't theirs. They sent people to help the Ionian Greeks as they were fighting against the Persians. So Darius the Great, the king of Persia, sent Persian troops, right, to conquer these Greek city-states that had helped out in the Ionian revolt. All right, the Greeks are going to fight back. Early on, they're losing a bunch of different battles, but finally they defeated the Persians at the Battle of Marathon. Fast forward 10 years later, Darius is now dead, and his son Xerxes is now king. He wants to accomplish what his dad had never been able to accomplish. He sends forces in to fight the Greeks again. All right, now he's going to send forces to invade Sparta. We have the famous battle of where the 300 Spartans lose at Thermopylae, and but they allow the Greeks enough time to organize. The end result here is the Persians. It looks like they're going to win, but they somehow are defeated by the Spartans and the Athenians. All right, this was truly an example of David versus Goliath. Somehow the little tiny Greek city-states defeated this huge giant Persian empire. Okay, so if you want to write down Persian empire is defeated by the Greek city-states. The result of this, well, the Persian empire is weakened a little bit. They just kind of ignored the Greek city-states after that. They went home. They just went back to what they were doing. All right. The result, though, is the Greek city-states said, we can't just live independently of each other. We've actually got to work together because we don't want to be invaded again. So they created an alliance system called the Delian League. All right, this is an agreement with a bunch of different Greek city-states to work together just in case they were invaded again. Now, the Athenians were the largest. They happened to be in charge of giving out the orders in this alliance system, and they also were in charge of the money. The Spartans are not going to like that very much. So, as soon as the Persian War is over, we have this period in between the two wars. This is really the golden age of Athens. It's during this time that the Parthenon is going to be built. It's during this time that Socrates and Plato are going to be alive. It's also during this time that this guy, Pericles, comes to power in Athens, and he makes a name for himself. He is a military leader and a spokesman. He's going to promote Athenian democracy and talk about how everyone in Athens should have rights, or all the male citizens anyway should have rights. But this is really the golden age of Athens. However, not everything is so great, because during this time the Spartans really didn't like the Athenians very much. Okay, so now we're going to have a war between the Athenians and the Spartans. This is called the Peloponnesian War. Okay, it's between Athens and Sparta. Athens has the best navy in this entire region. The Spartans had the best army, right? The Spartans never lose battles on the ground. The Athenians rarely ever lost battles at sea. Okay, and why is this? The Spartans just didn't trust Athens with their money. They thought Athens was getting too power hungry, so they declared war. All right, these wars lasted from 431 BC to about 404. All right, these are a series of wars, and during this time, each side, Athens and Sparta, they're going around and getting allies all over Greece. They're saying, you need to join us. All right, if you're not with us, we think you're with them. So Sparta declares war on Athens. All right. They want to fight, obviously, on the ground. But if you're Athens, they didn't want to fight on the ground. They wanted to attack at sea. All right. Early on, after some early battles where both sides were winning and losing, both sides signed a truce. However, then Athens, unfortunately, had a plague hit their city where about a third of their population died. All right. After some other battles were fought, eventually the Spartans are going to win. Okay, there's some really incredible battles that are fought here. We're not going to go into the details in this class. What I really want you to know is that Athens loses to Sparta. All right, the effect that has is the people of Athens lose confidence in their government. All right, more importantly, the effect that this has is the Greek city-states fought wars against each other, civil wars, for about 30 years. All right, even though Sparta won, they're still weakened. So all of these cities are weakened, and this is going to open up the door just a little bit and allow maybe for conquest. All right, it's going to allow for these Greek cities to be conquered. So next, we get the story of Alexander the Great. Okay. All right, what makes Alexander so great? What makes anybody great? We don't really know. Was Alexander really that good of a guy? Probably not. Some people say he was a mass murderer. All right, regardless, what we do know is Alexander the Great conquered the largest empire known to man at that time. It was even larger than the empire the Persians had owned. He did this all in the period of about 8 years, all before the age of 32. Okay, so he is really a very great military leader. All right, first of all, Alexander the Great. Before him, we've got his dad. All right, his name's Philip II. Okay, he was the king of a small kingdom in the northern part of Greece called Macedonia. The Macedonians had always thought of themselves as Greek. They had always wanted to be like the Greeks, but they just never really got the respect that they wanted from the more powerful city-states like Athens and Sparta and Thebes, all right, and Ephesus and some of these other powerful Greek cities. So they never really quite got the respect that they wanted. They were kind of always considered as just kind of backwater, really kind of rednecks who thought of themselves as Greek, but the Greeks just looked at them and laughed. All right. But after the Peloponnesian War, all right, Philip II sees an opportunity. All right, he says maybe now we can actually make Macedonia great. We can conquer some of these Greek cities that used to not give us any respect. So Philip does a couple things. First thing he does is he turns Macedonian's army from being a really kind of an amateur army where all men only served when they were called upon, and he turns it into a professional army. Right? He's going to use tax money to pay soldiers so their only job will be to fight. So even if they're not at war, his soldiers are still, their job is still to be a soldier. They're still training to fight. Another thing he does is he uses this new type of formation. It's a little different than the phalanx used by the earlier Greeks. And they're going to be marching in larger formations, and they're going to have these big, long spears, right, called sarasas. And these long spears, they're going to use these. They're going to use them in battle, right? They were very, very good at marching. They could. This is kind of the way that they look. But this is going to be the cutting edge military technology of the time, right? So you guys write this down, but listen to the story I'm telling you here, all right? Philip II is going to conquer most of Greece by 339 BCE. Okay, shortly after this, he happens to be at his own daughter's wedding, and he is actually killed by one of his bodyguards. All right, happened to be that his oldest son was a kid named Alexander. Alexander's mom had never really gotten along with Philip II. You know, he had multiple wives. He didn't really like his Alexander's mom very much. Alexander never really got along with his dad, but he always dreamed of being king. Alexander had been raised by his mother, who told him, "You are destined to be a king." She even told him that he was like a god. He was more than human. He was like related to Zeus and Hercules and all of them. So Philip II is going to die shortly after conquering Greece. And his son, who's only 18 years old at the time, takes the throne of Macedonia. All right. As soon as he takes the throne, um, some of the Greek city-states that had been recently conquered saw that as an opportunity, said, maybe we can get our power back. There's this young kid who's king. Let's test out and see what he does. So they revolted. What does Alexander do? He decides to put down these revolts like with an iron fist. He sends the troops in to these revolting Greek city-states. He is not only going to defeat them, but he kills almost every single person, all right, in these cities that were revolting. All right, he burns their city to the ground, and he sells all the women and children into slavery. That's pretty harsh, but what's he trying to do here? He's trying to make a point. He wants to make a point that he is a strong ruler. Nobody better mess with him. All right. Next thing he does is he turns and he says, my dad was never able to defeat the Persians. He says, even though by this point he's like 22, he says, even though I'm young, I'm going to go do what my dad can never do. So he leads his troops over into modern day Turkey. He fights a series of wars. Almost every one of these battles, he is outnumbered, but his troops are going to win battle after battle. All right. He pretty quickly conquers all of the Persian army, and he says, you know what? I'm not done. I want to be the greatest conqueror of all times. I'm not going to stop. I'm going to keep going until I conquer all of the known world. So he goes into Egypt, where they welcome him as a pharaoh. They name him Pharaoh of Egypt. Then he turns and continues to go eastward. He eventually gets all the way over into India. All right. At this point, his men had been marching for 11 years. They were tired. They wanted to go home. So Alexander finally agreed. Unfortunately for Alexander, he's only 32 years old at this point. He's never lost a single battle. On his way home from India, he got sick. We don't know exactly how. Some people say he got poisoned by his own men. Probably not true. But he got sick. He had to stop along the way, and he actually is going to die at age 32. All right. So he died in 323 BCE before he could set up a stable government. After he dies, his generals are going to divide up his huge empire into really three different smaller empires. Okay, there's one in Egypt, there's one that's most of what used to be Persia, and there's one that's a little bit closer over to India. Okay, these empires are going to rule for a while. After a while, the ones in the East are going to be conquered by the next great civilization we're going to talk about. It's going to be ancient Rome. Okay, Alexander did leave a legacy behind. All right, in a very short period of time, he created one of the largest empires in the entire ancient world. He also is responsible for spreading Greek culture all over his empire. All right, so while he's conquering, he's spreading Greek culture into Egypt. Right, he's spreading Greek culture into Persia. Right, during that time, the Greeks, their culture is mixing. Right, he's bringing some stuff from Persian and even Indian culture back with him home. This new culture is called Hellenistic culture, and it's something we'll talk about in class. All right, his conquest ended the era of independent Greek city-states, and he was a ruthless, bloodthirsty commander, but he's also considered to be one of the most successful military commanders of all time. All right, next we'll talk about Rome.